All right, this is going to be a video on a fly that you probably definitely know some stuff about. This is your classic gold-ribbed hare's ear, but I'm going to do this in olive, which is pretty much the only color I fish this pattern in. That's kind of what we're going to have when we're done with it. I'm doing some production tying right now of the flies that I use during the season. So last week I did the video on the golden stone. This is going to be the other fly that I use, which is the olive hare's ear. I'm doing a bunch of them. I've got about 2 dozen sitting on my desk right here. So figured I'd make a video on it. And, you're not going to see anything, crazy, inventive or anything like that. This is a pretty popular fly. A lot of people tie it. A lot of people use it. So you're not really going to see anything too crazy here, but I'll show you the way I tie it. I do a couple things that are a little bit different. Nothing too crazy, but I've got this fly honed in to where it's exactly where I want it. I use it all the time. My rig 90+% of the time is a golden stone fly for an anchor, and then this up on my tag. That's what I fish almost all the time. Sometimes to a pathetic degree where I feel like I'm the kid in the corner with no friends, just sitting there not changing flies like everybody else. But this is the combo I fished 90+% of the time. It's been incredibly productive for me. So I've got a size 16 J Stockard curved nymph hook. They make a great curved nymph hook. It's the only hook that I use for nymphs. I've got a 2.5mm matte black firehole stone on there. And I've got some 10-aught brown veevus thread that I'm going to use. So we'll get this tied in behind my weighted underbody, and we'll go about halfway down the shank, getting my thread started. We'll get that out of there. So now, before I advance my thread anymore, I'm going to take this pheasant tail here, and I'm going to rip off about maybe 5 or 6 strands. You don't need too much. This is one of the first areas where I do something a little bit different than what a lot of people do with hare's ear nymphs. I see a lot of hare's ear nymphs with really, really big bushy tails, and I've just never really understood that. When was the last time you saw a mayfly nymph with a gigantic bushy tail? So I don't do that. I tone the tail down quite a bit, and I just use a few strands of pheasant tail. I'll take a look at it. That's about the length I'm looking for, maybe a little shorter. Pull that back a little. Hold it tight while you cinch down some really tight touching wraps. Now on the way back up, wire is a very easy material to tie on the way up. So I've got a piece of extra small gold ultra wire. So I'm going to slip that in on the side here, get one loose wrap, get the length I want. And now I'm just going to take touching wraps all the way back to the front of the fly, locking all of that stuff in. I get that in my material clip and get rid of this. Now, one of the things I want to point out is this is a fly that you're probably going to use a lot. You're probably not just going to tie 1 or 2. Who doesn't use hare's ear nymphs? If you don't, that's crazy to me. But I just cut off this chunk of pheasant tail here. See how long that is? What I do to save materials is I take this part of the pheasant tail and I just put that aside. And I tie these flies in 2s. And I'll explain what I mean when I get to that step. But take the cut off that you just cut and put that aside and don't get rid of it. So now in the meantime, I'm going to take some touching wraps. I'm going to go down my shank about 1/3 of the way. And what you're going to do here is you're going to build up a tapered underbody. Now, you can get the shape you want with dubbing, but the more dubbing you use on this fly, or any nymph really, is going to affect your sink rate. So instead of loading this up with dubbing, I'm going to create the body with thread, and then I'm going to cover the body with a light little thing of dubbing so that the fly isn't just a big mattress of dubbing, and that'll help it sink quick. As for dubbing, what I use is I use one of these olive hare's masks. Kind of hard to see it in the camera there, but that's what I use for all of my dubbing. And what I'll do is I'll kind of show you where I take a lot of this from. Right here in the not really showing up too well, but right here in the middle, the face part, I just slip my scissors in there and I just cut off big globs of that stuff. And then I have a coffee grinder on my desk. That's another little thing that you really should have on your desk if you don't have one, is a coffee grinder. You can get one on Amazon super cheap. I don't even think I paid $10 for mine. Just leave it right on your desk. You can throw dubbing in there, and when you cut the dubbing off of the hare's mask, throw it in the coffee grinder. It'll fluff it up and give you a really nice uniform pile of dubbing that's got guard hairs mixed in. It's got everything that you need. So we're just going to take that and we're just going to twist up a nice, tight, slim dubbing noodle. I'm not going to go too crazy here. Get that off my fingers. I'm going to hold my wire tight while I get a couple of wraps to where the dubbing actually starts going on the body. And we're just going to take touching wraps all the way up. You shouldn't have to do too much work with the body because you've already taken care of the shape with your thread. And that'll do it. Now, obviously, that body looks a little bit bigger than we want for maybe a small little nymph, but when I come through with the wire here, that'll kind of mash that down a little bit, and that'll really create the shape that you're looking for. So we'll get that in there, cinch that down, and that's it for the body. Now, if you want, you can go back in with a little brush and tease out some of that dubbing, make it a little bit buggier, but I tend to leave the body just the way it is. Now, I had mentioned before that I tie these in twos. So what I would normally do right now if I wasn't filming this video is I would whip finish this fly right now and put it aside, which I know sounds kind of weird, but I would whip finish the fly, put it aside, and I would start a new one. And the reason why is the next step that we're going to do is we're going to tie in the wing case. And I'm going to just use some more pheasant tail fibers to do that. But the reason why I would tie this off, remember I said before that when we cut the tail, you're left with this much of pheasant tail? Well, if I put this fly aside and start a new one, when I tie off the tail for that fly, I'll have two of these pieces. And two of these chunks is enough to make two wing cases on two flies. So that's kind of how I consolidate and save them. You know, I save quite a bit of material by doing that, by tying these in twos. So it's definitely something I would recommend doing. Saves on a lot of material, especially when it comes to pheasant tail. I'm usually not a skimper on materials because fly tying materials are super cheap. But with pheasant tail, you know, you use quite a bit of it and you'll use up that feather pretty quickly. So it's good to save a little bit. So I'm going to take a few fibers of this and I'm going to waste some of this for video purposes because I'm a giver. And we'll get that cinched down. Next order of business, pretty simple. Let's dub up the thorax. Again, nice little light noodle here, and we're not going to dub this all the way to the bead. I'm going to hold this tight. We're going to get a couple of good chunky wraps behind it, and I'm going to wrap my thorax to about there, and I'm going to leave a space between my dubbing and my bead while I double my thread back over and tie in a real small little dubbing loop and return my thread to the front. So the reason why I do that is I like to put the front part of the dubbing into a dubbing loop. And the reason why is because when you spin this up, you're going to get a real nice buggy look. That'll work as the nymph legs. Gives this fly a really, really buggy look in the water. So we're going to take that, get that spun. Get that thread fit into my hackle pliers, and we'll just take the last few wraps, stroke some of those fibers back. You can kind of see how doing that with the dubbing loop is going to give you a much buggier look. And those guard hairs and all that stuff mixed in there, flailing out like that, that's going to be the legs. So we'll take our wing case, fold everything back, pull the wing case over the top, give it a couple of real nice firm turns, give a nice turn right in front, And we're on our way. So at this point, you can obviously snip those fibers off if you want. I want to get them as close as possible, so I'm going to hold it tight, and I'm just going to push a razor blade up against the bead. Get that right off there nice and close. And the last step, what we're going to do is grab a little bit more dubbing. And again, you don't want too much here. Tiny, tiny little bit. However much you have and however much you think is enough. I would back that off by about a half. You don't want to overdub the front. So a couple of really, really light little applications here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a couple of turns just to cover up that last little bit of thread. Once that's covered up, with some dubbing still on there, I'm going to take my whip finisher, get that on there, take a couple more just to make sure that that's all covered, and then I'm going to align my thread as I pull this stuff back right at the back of that bead. And if you watch that point, as I pull this tight, that thread will disappear right down beneath that bead. I didn't really do a very good job of that right there. So I need a little bit more dubbing. Sometimes you nail that step in one shot and you're done. Sometimes you build up a little bit too much and it doesn't quite do what you want. But that's fine. Just cover up that last little part. And that's that. If you want to tease any of that out or anything, obviously you're more than welcome to, but that fly is plenty buggy. That'll take care of whatever it is you need. I am a massive fan of hare's ears, especially the olives. This is a great fly. As I told you, this is what I use 90% of the time. This isn't just a general tutorial on something that is, just random. This is one of my primary flies. Always on my tag. Always an olive color. And again, it's a hare's ear, very popular fly. There's a million ways to tie it, but that's how I do mine. So give that a shot, see if that's something that works for you. You can do a ton of different things. You can put a flashback on that wing case if you want. You can put a little bit of resin on the wing case. You can add a little hot spot up there if you want to use some orange or red thread up by the bead. A lot of different things you can do. For me, I just tie them up just like this and use them just as they are, and they're incredibly productive. So pretty straightforward, probably not the most world-changing fly you've ever seen, but ultra productive, easy to tie. I'm in the middle of doing multiple dozen right now. If you tie them in twos, you can save on a lot of materials and get them done pretty quickly. So any questions, anything, put them right in the comments, and appreciate it.